Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics and Random. Berto Will is your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today. We have a packed show for you today. But you know what? We do it every time we do it. We make sure to take care of you. Número uno. ¿Quién es número uno para nosotros? Ustedes son los números unos. Hey, folks. Michael Rudnick, I've been away from Facebook for about a week now. Need to be coming back soon, but only barely today. Michael, where have you been? Are you just taking a break? Sometimes we do need to take that break because you know how Facebook can get sometimes. It can get pretty heady. It can get pretty heady. Folks, for you that are just joining, please remember, go ahead and share. I always say that. I must always say that. I will always say that because that is how we are going to get the message out. That is how we are going to be able to inform people. That is how we are going to be able to enlighten people. And when I say we, that is exactly what I mean. We. This is a community. This is a what do we call it? A collective. This is how we do things together to make things better. And you know, I talk all about that as well in my good old book. It's Worth It. How to make your right-wing relatives, friends, and neighbors, how to talk to them. So, folks, please go ahead and consider. I always have to start out at doing my book. You know, that is one of the things that I really have to do. Anyhow, please go ahead and consider getting my new book, and I am putting the link inside of our inside of our feed. So check out the feed. There's a link to the book. Anyhow, we're gonna have a great show for you today. How do we start the show? The title of the show today is, and let me get to the screen. Let me put it on screen for you. The title of the show today is Thom Hartmann discusses the economy, monopoly, and more. You know who Thom Hartmann is, right? Thom Hartmann, the #1 progressive radio show host in the country. Thom Hartmann discusses the economy, monopoly, and more. We'll talk a little bit about the Democratic National Convention, which I thought a lot of people said it started out slow, but man, did Michelle Obama finish it. And let's go ahead and get the program started. So the title of the show, Thom Hartmann discusses the economy, monopoly, and more. We take on the Democratic National Convention. Thom Hartmann visited to discuss his new book on monopolies, and we discuss other issues. The Democratic National Convention display a unity seldom seen. Michelle Obama's speech at the Democratic National Convention was likely the best one she has given to date. And she was sitting in a chair, I don't know, in her kitchen or her living room or somewhere, but I mean, it was like sitting down around a table and talking to her, listening to her. She's a very good communicator. She threw some shade, though, at El Presidente using his own words. I thought that was pretty nice. Second item, Trump attempt to using the post office to steal the election, and his fascist proclivities are starting to lose him some Republican votes. So we'll show you a little video on that. Thom Hartmann visits with us. I told you guys about that to discuss the hidden history of monopolies, how big business destroyed the American dream. And Trump jokes about a third term, and I put on an extra video on there that I really want because I saw Katie Tur was made aware of something, and Katie Tur, you could see her bright-eyed when she figured out. I'm not going to talk about it because I talk about it in a video, but anyhow, let's start talking about that stuff with Michelle Obama. Check this out.
As honest and clear as I possibly can. Donald Trump is the wrong president for our country. He has had more than enough time to prove that he can do the job, but he is clearly in over his head. He cannot meet this moment. He simply cannot be who we need him to be for us. It is what it is.
1,000 Americans are dying a day.
They are dying. That's true. And it is what it is.
It is what it is.
That was like a little gift for you guys because when I saw that yesterday and as soon as she says, it is what it is, I remember, wait a minute, I did the video on it is what it is and I placed it on Politics Done Right. And it was like, wow, that was so cool. So anyhow, that is that one. Now, Trump has been pushing this postal thing and how if somehow he loses the election, that means the election is rigged. And I don't know, he may think that that plays well with people, right? And the truth of the matter is, we really don't know how that plays with people because you never ever really know. But it turns out it may not be playing as well with people as one might believe. Check out this former Trump voter and how this goes here. If you want to know why Republicans are starting to backtrack on these things, of kind of putting some pushback on Trump on the postal service and all the stuff he's talking about rigged election, check out this voter and it makes it quite clear.
I want to introduce you to Bob Roth. He's a Republican voter here. He voted for Trump in 2016, and I've been talking to him since last November as he's been weighing whether to vote for him again. He recently made that decision. Take a listen. Are you still undecided?
No, not undecided anymore.
What was the final factor for you?
When there is this deliberate setup to set in one's mind that whatever the outcome is will be fake or rigged or whatever you want to call it. To me, when you seed those, sow those seeds of distrust, you undermine what democracy is. And so anybody that is going to try to persuade the general public that their vote doesn't matter because it's rigged is undermining democracy, in my opinion.
Hey, absolutely undermining democracy. You can't argue with that. And Donald Trump wants you to believe that somehow, if I don't win, look, I mean, it's funny, right? All the polls show that he is in the toilet. They all show that he's in the toilet. But somehow, if the election matches what the polls say, well, it's a rigged election. What gets me, right, is the people who follow Trump, the people who believe in Trump, the people who follow, let's say, the Fox Newses or all the conservative polls, which also say that Donald Trump is losing, and he comes out and makes a statement like that, doesn't that tell you that the guy is really, or that guy really has fascist proclivities? I think that is clear. And if you can't see it, why not? If you can't see it, why not? If you doubt it, look at some of the things that he says. Some of the things that he says it all. Check this out.
I'll tell you, if I don't win Minnesota, I'm never going to do it if I run for a third or fourth term, okay? I'll tell you, if I don't win Minnesota, I'm never going to do it if I run for a third or fourth term, okay?
Now, folks would say, oh, but the president was just joking there. He wasn't serious. I mean, this guy thinks of all these things in the background, and he tries to see what people say about it, to see if it comes over. How does it come across? Is it something that the people are going to think I'm serious about? Or are they going to start having intelligent conversations that say, well, maybe if we go ahead and the Constitution wasn't quite accurate when it says you only get 2 terms. Maybe if one takes a look at it this way, we could... Folks, I'm telling you, this guy is dangerous. A lot of people say you overreact, these things aren't so. They are never so until they are. And what I'm saying is when presidents display this type of being, you have to be concerned. Now, yesterday, remember that I spoke about a 10-point advantage Donald Trump had in the economy. And by gosh, it seems like an impossibility. How could Trump really have a 10-point advantage over anybody? Even my coffee cup. How could he have an advantage over that? The way the economy is, the kind of economy that was given to him, and how he has thrown it right down into the ground. Yeah, a lot of people use the coronavirus as the excuse. How could that be possible? I want you to see there's an interview between Katie Tur and Michael Steele, and they're going back and forth with respect to that number. And I want you to keep, for all that you do as you're watching this video cut that I'm going to give you, for all that you do, keep your eyes focused on Katie Tur, because you're going to see when a bell rings in Katie Tur's eyes. Check this out. A few days ago, I was confounded as far as why is it that Donald Trump has a 10-point lead in the economy. He has done nothing to really deserve that, and I expressed that there were problems in the repo markets and all of that that showed that the economy was about to fall anyhow, and that the coronavirus was likely just an excuse that was given. But altogether, he inherited a growing economy, and he didn't really keep the slope at the same pace. But, you know, he still gets that persistent 10-point lead over Biden. Watch when this reporter figures out that there is something, this host figures out that there's something to that 10-point economy bump. Is it really? Does that 10-point really speak to the economy? Check this out.
The economy was doing well with the last administration. It was on an upward curve. It was going up. Donald Trump inherited that. The economy has fallen apart since this pandemic, and the pandemic has only gotten worse under Donald Trump's leadership. If there are people that are still on the fence right now, are they actually gettable voters?
Sure. Yeah, they are, because you've got to understand what that hook is that keeps them on the fence. You've got to understand what it will take to get them off the fence. I would contend to you that the hook, one of those hooks, is the economy. Despite, that the economy is flatlined and crashed and all of that, tell me why there's still a 10-point advantage to the president. They're not making the same assessment that a lot of the quote smart money or the smart people are making that about this and saying.
But what reality is that rooted in, Michael, is what I'm asking.
It's rooted in their reality. It's rooted in their reality. They feel whatever they're feeling, whatever they're taking away from it, they still give that kind of advantage to the president. And I think the Biden campaign and the Democratic Party and those who are ancillary to that have to understand at its core, what is it that's making these folks still think and tick in that direction. I'm not saying that, at the end of the day, they will or won't move off of Donald Trump. What I am saying is, if you want to run the kind of campaign you're going to need to win, you're going to have to understand that element of this as well. Because when you look at all the other metrics, Biden is leading. But a 10-point, given everything that we've seen on the economy, having a 10-point edge for Trump, you got to understand why that is.
I think this is where things get really interesting, because I wonder, is it actually the economy then, that maybe they're just using the economy as a stand-in for another feeling that they have about Donald Trump? So when the Biden team tries to figure out what is it that's going to make them feel more confident with Biden and vote for him, should they be looking at the economy or should they be looking at something else?
Katie, that's why I like it, Katie. You got your finger on the underside of that question. That's exactly right. Is this polling on the economy a stand-in for something that's a little bit deeper, that goes a little bit further down than we're looking? And the key for me is what the president said the last few weeks. What's been his appeal and his approach the last few weeks? Specifically to white women, specifically to white suburban women, right? They're coming for your homes. They're coming for your communities. At the end of that, at that economic rainbow for these folks lies the ugliness of fear of others, lies the ugliness of fears of my neighborhood, my community changing in a way I may not want, and certainly I would not express in polite company. So yeah, that's part of understanding what that 10-point number is telling us or saying, or specifically to your point, Katie, is hiding. Trump knows, he at least has a sense about that. And there's a reason why you've got to pay attention to how he talks and what he says, particularly to suburban voters.
This is where polling can only go so far.
Folks, think about this. Suppose President Obama had children with 3 different women. Suppose President Obama used to lie for just about everything, and they were provably wrong, provable lies. Suppose President Obama worked with foreign companies and foreign governments who influence America. Suppose President Obama went ahead and stiffed customers that he had before. Suppose President Obama went ahead and did not pay his bills. He would have been a womanizer. He would be stereotyped as a womanizing thug, thief. All these things he would have been labeled as many times he was labeled as. But Donald Trump can do all these things that would generally be considered negative. And even the people that should be the folks of virtue, the evangelicals, even they give him a pass. That is a height of privilege, and that is the bias others have to get over to move ahead. Classic. And it was, did you see that smile on Katie Tur's face when she developed that on her own? And when I talk to people about, I speak a lot about that in my book as well, right? The best thing that happens to people is when you ask them the question and then they are the ones who answer it themselves because they came into the question from their own intellect, because most people are smart. And if you don't tell them something, they have to exercise their brains to come out with the right answer. And they usually do. When they're honest, they usually do. And it was great seeing that Katie Tur's face, that smile changed. And she got it. And she got it. Now, our job as activists, as allies, and all as accomplices, our job is to get as many people as possible to get it on their own. And that's the thing, right? I mean, that's the thing. That is when people really change. You know, when Joe Lowe asked me a couple of questions and I started to self-analyze about my own biases, that's when it was fixed to me. It wasn't enough for somebody to say, you are wrong, you did that wrong, you're bad, you're this, you're that. When I realized I was wrong, when I realized I was bad, that's when the change occurred, right? And that is what I learned with as I get older, right? When the argument is starting to ask particular questions, now when we are talking here, most of us are activists, some people are listening in, and we do ask questions among each other. But once you get there, once you are able to say, let me ask the question to you, and then you answer it, and while you are answering it, you are having to think, your intellect is moving. That's the best, man. And that's what we try to do. Let me do stay with me, guys, because Thom Hartmann comes next. I had a great interview with Thom Hartmann. You're going to like that interview, but let me do a quick spiel here. Please go ahead and consider getting my book. You can get my book here. I'm putting it in the screen. That is, you can either go to politicsdoneright.com/my-books to get the books, see all my books. But I inside of the thing, I gave you the whole link to my book inside of the chat, both on Facebook and everywhere else. But please, what we really need is we need supporters. We need subscribers to our program. So please consider going to politicsdoneright.com/Patreon. That is politicsdoneright.com/Patreon. And consider subscribing to our program. You can also provide support to our program by going to politicsdoneright.com/PayPal, politicsdoneright.com/PayPal. You can also subscribe to us on Facebook by going to politicsdoneright.com/Facebook. That is politicsdoneright.com/Facebook. And of course, you can see us at our store, politicsdoneright.com/store, where you can actually get things like our cup, t-shirts, all that kind of stuff that says, I support independent media. I support all these things. Okay, I'm done asking you to come to support us. I just ask you so kindly to either buy the book, support us via being subscribers, going to our store, all that good stuff. I just took all of that into the chat. Anyhow, without further ado, let's go ahead and have a little chat with somebody I respect dearly because, this guy has read, so this guy probably has read more books that I have in age to the second power. So there's always something to learn from him. Here is El Señor Thom Hartmann. Welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm here with the one and only Thom Hartmann. He's back with us again. And you know what, folks? He has another book out, and it's called The Hidden History of Monopolies, How Big Business Destroyed the American Dream. Welcome aboard, Thom. How are you doing today?
Hey, Egberto, it's great to see you. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on your program.
Well, talking about honor, the honor is always mine. You know, I've been following you for years now, for a long time, from coffee party days and all the other times. But I tell you, Thom, when you wrote this book and I read this book and I picked it up, it was like this was right down the alley of a lot of the stuff that we talk about, from monopolies to unfettered capitalism to the whole works. And I like the angle that you take. I wasn't able to read the book in details, but I scanned it right through real fast and said, oh my God, it's right there. I want to ask you to explain something to the American people because I think they don't quite understand this. Before we can get into basics, what is a corporation?
A corporation is a legal fiction that provides a structure or a framework within which people can legally conduct business in the United States or anywhere in the world. I mean, corporations are general. The modern corporation was started in 1601, in December of 1601, when Queen Elizabeth I chartered the East India Company. And, you know, it's gone through a lot of tweaks in the years since then, but it's really only a 400-year-old institution. And in its modern form in the United States, arguably only about 200 years old.
Now, isn't it true that corporations in the past, they came into existence for a certain thing and then they went out of existence?
Yeah. In fact, up until the 1890s, most states required corporations to, essentially shut their doors after 20, 30, or 40 years. 40 years was the most common, but there was a limited lifespan. Now, the corporation could roll over. They could close their doors, and then an hour later, all the assets be picked up by a brand new corporation of the same name. But it was basically a corporate governance oversight kind of thing. The secretaries of state in all the states up until the 1890s were required every year or every 2 years, depending on the state, to examine the books of every corporation doing business in the state and to determine whether they were complying with what every state required the first sentence of Articles of Incorporation to be, or the statement of purpose in the Articles of Incorporation, which was this corporation is incorporated to benefit the people of the state of blank by fill in the blank, manufacturing railroad cars or whatever it may be. So the first purpose of a corporation up until the 1890s in the United States was to benefit the people. And the secretaries of state had to evaluate the corporations on an annual or biannual basis on that criteria. And if the corporation failed, they got the corporate death penalty. It happened to a couple thousand corporations a year across the US until the 1890s.
Well, you talk about the death penalty, I think, as part of a solution at the end. So let's go ahead and kind of put that at the end. But I tell you one thing. The reason I wanted you to do that is because people look at corporations as some abstract thing, and it's almost now like a cliche. And I want to take it away from being a cliche, and that's why I love what you're doing with your book and your series. I want to take these things away from being a cliche that, let's say, the right can use as, oh, that's just how those wacko guys at the left think, and put it into something meaningful to people. Now, large corporations, for all practical purposes, have turned into exactly what your book talks about, which is monopolies. Yeah. How did that happen? And give us the story.
Well, if you think of it in terms of biology, we all have bodies, and our bodies are relatively homeostatic in biological balance. And, your kidneys don't demand more of your body than your liver, inappropriately, for example. But if a single cell in the body, and it always starts with one cell, if a single cell in the body decides that it's going to reproduce, to infinity, and it's going to start sucking down the resources, it's going to start aggressively competing with every other cell in the body rather than cooperating, that will happen, and that cell will grow, that cell will turn into a cell mass, and it will develop its own vascular system, and it'll reroute all the blood and nutrients in the body to itself. And, in the process, the person will shrink up and wither away, and we call that cancer. Similarly, in the business world, when a corporation, in the context of the larger ecosystem of corporations, of businesses, decides that it's going to suck up all the resources, it's going to suck up all the customers, it's going to suck up all the money, it's going to prevent other companies from being able to successfully compete. When that happens, I think that it's entirely appropriate to call that cancer too. But instead, we call that monopoly, or what's more common in America actually is oligopoly, which is where you have a handful of corporations dominating a sector or an industry. 3, 4 airlines, 3 or 4, 5 networks, in television or radio. 5 food companies, 3 restaurant chains, et cetera. These aren't true monopolies; they're oligopolies, but they're functionally the same thing. So I put them under the umbrella of monopoly. But it's cancer. And back in the 1880s, realizing that this was cancer, our government, with the help of Senator Sherman from Ohio, passed a law that was designed to be the immune system. I mean, we have cells in our bodies that become cancerous literally all the time, apparently every day. And we have an immune system that recognizes those individual rogue cancer cells flying around and attacks them and kills them. And you have to have the same thing in capitalism. So the Sherman Antitrust Act, which was an anti-monopoly law, was designed to be the immune system for capitalism. And it worked pretty well, along with its children, the Clayton Act and the Antitrust Act of I think it was 1954. And they kept corporations to a reasonable extent in check.
How did they do that?
Until the 80s. Well, basically what they said was, if for example, in the 1930s, I think it was, Buster Brown was a shoe company, and Thom McAn was a shoe company. I remember that well because I adopted their spelling for my name, Thom, when I was like 8 years old, because it was partly that. It was partly that's how Thomas Jefferson and Thomas Edison would occasionally spell it. And none of these companies had more than 3 or 4% of the total marketplace. But Buster Brown wanted to buy another company. I don't think it was Thom McAn, but it was another one of the shoe companies in the United States. And the regulatory agency, the federal agency that oversaw that, which had a different name at the time, but today we'd call it the Securities and Exchange Commission or the Justice Department, or both. Said you can't merge because as a combined company, you'll have more than 5 or 6% of the total shoe market, and that is moving in the direction of monopoly. In the 1880s, what happened was Ohio had passed their version of the Sherman Act a few years before the federal version, and no coincidence that Senator Sherman came out of Ohio, and people I don't think anybody's alive today that's old enough to remember, but back in the 1880s, 1890s, the 2 largest oil producing states were Ohio and Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
And thus Pennzoil, and thus Standard Oil of Ohio. And all those wells have been largely pumped dry now, and in fact were by the 1940s. But that's where the action was. And so John Rockefeller set up Standard Oil in Ohio and basically reached out to all his competitors and said, instead of my having to put you out of business, I'll let you buy into my company by giving me your company, and I'll give you some stock in this larger company in exchange for that, which wasn't a terrible deal. And he ended up, although many of his practices were just downright evil, but nonetheless, he ended up controlling nearly, as I recall, 97%, it's in the book, of the entire oil business in multiple states, particularly Ohio and Pennsylvania. And so the Ohio Attorney General's office said to him, if you do this, if you continue to do this, we're going to give you 1 year to stop. And if you continue to do this, we're going to put you in prison, because it was a criminal violation. So in the 1890s, Rockefeller reached out rather publicly, and said, if any state is willing to change their corporation laws to allow what I'm doing to be legal, I will move my operations to that state. I'll bring hundreds of employees with me and millions of dollars. And that kicked off a massive competition on the East Coast between New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, and Delaware New Jersey ended up getting his business. Delaware ended up with the most lax corporate laws, which is why more than half of all the companies in the New York Stock Exchange today are Delaware corporations.
Credit card companies inclusive.
Yeah, although the credit card companies did something that's kind of slick. They got Nixon to pass a law saying that banks could operate across state lines. Prior to that, it was illegal, and that's why Wells Fargo was just a California company, and Bank of America was just a New York company. So first of all, he allowed them to do their business across state lines, and then the banks reached out to states around the United States and said, we will move all of our credit card operations to whatever state gives us the loosest regulatory environment. And North Dakota did that. They said, basically, you can do anything. And back at that time, in fact, it was illegal to charge more than 12% interest. There were usury laws. But North Dakota said, you can charge whatever you want, you can do whatever you want, you can screw your customers, we don't care, bring it all to North Dakota. And that's why if you pull your credit card out of your pocket right now, you'll see that it's typically at the bottom in the fine print, it says a North Dakota corporation.
Right.
And this is why the health insurance companies right now and Donald Trump are trying to say, we need to have the ability of insurance companies, health insurance companies, to sell across state lines so that they can then just, basically bribe one state legislature, to crash the laws, and then they'll move all to that state, and then we'll all be screwed with regard to health insurance.
Now, Thom, what you just said there is something important, because you'll hear Republicans throw that out quite often. And Americans don't quite understand what it means. So that statement that you just made there, we've got to frame to let people understand exactly what's going on.
It is a big deal. It's credit card companies can screw you, and Trump and the Republicans.
Absolutely, it's huge. But people just say it, right? They just go out there and say, "Oh, we need to allow when they're itemizing how to make healthcare better or whatever better. We just need to go ahead and allow them to shop around states." No, that point that you made is very important. Now, let's kind of dial back a bit, because early in your book, you talk about patents and copyrights under monopolies. Tell me exactly
something you have some experience with.
Yes. Tell me, give me what you think about, give me your spill on that, if you will.
Well, I agree with Jefferson. Jefferson actually had worked for 6 months or so as a patent clerk when he was young, when he was learning to be a lawyer. And he had some very, very strong opinions on this. He invented several hundred inventions during his life, and he refused to patent any of them, as did his friend Ben Franklin, who invented bifocals, and the Franklin stove, and had something like 400 major consequential inventions. And they both felt that when you invent something, you, by definition, are standing on the shoulders of somebody who invented the thing that you invented this out of. And therefore, it should be offered for the benefit of society. On the other hand, Jefferson acknowledged that you want to encourage people to invent things. And that's why the Constitution explicitly says in Article 1, Section 8, that Congress may pass laws protecting copyrights, patents, and trademarks in order to advance the useful arts and sciences, is the phrase in the Constitution. So we want to give people an incentive. So Jefferson thought, well, 3 years should be enough. In 3 years, you can make money off your invention, but we really want these inventions to roll back into the public as quickly as possible so that the next inventor will build on top of that last invention. And in fact, that was, I don't know exactly when the laws changed. I believe it's in the book. It's kind of, minute detail stuff. But over 240 years, we went
to 17 years. Yeah.
Yeah. It's much even longer than that in some cases now, with the ability to renew them and all this kind of stuff. And with trademarks, the mouse, Disney just made it crazy, which is in the book.
Right. It is crazy because, like I said, when it comes to these issues, and I think you brought it up fine. We are all built. We all develop based on what other people's work. So how comes we can just go ahead and be the person holding that patent? Now, you said that the founders were inherently anti-monopolistic. How true is? Kind of give
That's
me.
Very true.
Okay.
Virtually, if you look at the state constitutional conventions, more than half of the people who showed up to ratify the Constitution were farmers, teachers, or people who were in debt. You know, people talk about the oligarchs at the founding, or even the people who were at the Constitutional Convention. It wasn't until 1891, I believe it was, that America had its first person who was worth $1 million in today's dollars. And $1 million in today's dollars will buy you a nice house in downtown Portland, Oregon. You know, not even a fancy house. Jefferson died bankrupt. Washington died close to bankrupt. The richest man who signed the Constitution was John Hancock, and his net worth was about $700,000 in today's money. So these guys were, you know, the upper middle class basically, and most of them were running their own little ventures. You know, whether it was plantations. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of problems with that. And the way it was done back then, you know, with slavery and everything else. But whether it was plantations or whether it was, you know, Washington made nails for horseshoes, and I think he made horseshoes as well. He was making steel pipe. I mean, they were basically running small businesses. Virtually all of them. The only large corporation in America at the founding of this republic was the British East India Company, and the American Revolution was triggered in 1773 by the Boston Tea Party, which was an open revolt against.
You mentioned that in your book, yeah.
Monopoly, yeah. So, you know, there was a very strong anti-monopoly sentiment, which kind of went to hell in the South, starting in the 1820s with John C. Calhoun. And as a result, largely of the invention of cotton gin. That's kind of a digression, though. That's not in this book. That's all in the book that I just finished writing, which will be out in the spring, The Hidden History of Tyranny and Oligarchy in America.
Oh, wow. Oh, that is a great continuation to this.
Yeah, it's sort of the back. It's the book end of this book. This book is about monopoly in commerce, and the next book is about monopoly in political power.
Well, let me, since you said it that way, let me go ahead and say, give me the relationship between monopolies and the fermentation of, or how it affects the middle class.
Well, monopolies, you know, are inherently anti-middle class, because the goal of them, you know, once a business has achieved oligopoly or monopoly status, they no longer have to worry about their workers. People who have a particular skill set that's unique to that industry, you know, whether it's flight attendants or whether it's, you know, electricians or whatever it may be. If they, in a non-monopolized environment, they can always go to another employer. But in a highly monopolized environment, they really don't have that option. And so as a result of that, as monopoly has grown in the United States since basically the early 1980s, when Reagan just functionally stopped enforcing the anti-monopoly laws.
I want to touch on that in a special way, because you hit it a special way in your book, where you state Reaganomics ensured American leisure for the few. And here's where I would like to tie that into, Thom. Right now, you know, the $600 that we are given to the average American citizen who's unemployed.
We're getting,
We're getting, actually, yes, we're getting. One of the pretexts was that they're getting too much. It's going to stop them from working, and all they want to bring all these issues up, right? When the reality is that those that are on top of them, I think, are doing quite well. Much more so, and maybe, just maybe, that 40 hours at $15 an hour for a week may just help the economy as it did.
Yeah. Well, it raises the question, if conservatives and Republicans are so concerned that we're going to destroy the work ethic and thus destroy the American economy by giving people $600 a week, why the hell do they want Paris Hilton to get millions of dollars in inheritance? I mean, do they really hate her?
Wow. Wow. Yes, exactly, right?
You know, why do they want CEO salaries to go from the $100,000 to $200,000 a year that they were averaging in today's money back in 1960 to $30 or $40 million a year? Why should somebody earn, you know, $1 million every 2 weeks in their paycheck if $600 a week is enough to destroy a person's incentive to work?
When did I miss that on your show, Thom?
It's
When
crazy.
did I miss that one? I mean, that's actually the excellent analogy,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
what do they
Just
call
the
that?
hypocrisy of their argument.
Yes. When did I miss that show? I mean, that is actually the best analogy there are, because you're talking about an even greater delta. So, I mean,
Yeah.
what do they call it? That's a hell of a moral hazard, right?
Yeah, they must hate the Walton family, you know.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, you know, I like, I wanted to talk a little bit more about Reaganomics. And so explain to America, because Reagan still has a godly stance with even some progressives. I'm here in Texas, and you have some progressives still think fondly of his policies, and they actually think they were benevolent. Kind of express in a lot of the ways that you do how that that was almost the Powell Manifesto on steroids.
Yeah, well, it was, and it grew out of the Powell Manifesto, actually, the Powell Memo of 1971, and two Supreme Court decisions in 1976 and 78, Buckley versus Vallejo and First National Bank versus Bellotti, which legalized political bribery, and that brought a flood of cash into the Reagan campaign in 79 and put him into office in 1980 or 81. But basically, historically, we had always understood. I mean, go back and read Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, 1776, you know, or any of the classic, economists. We understood that what drives an economy is something called demand. People want, they have the resources to buy something, and then the people who are producing those somethings get to compete for the customer. And, you know, hopefully in a non-monopolized world. And Reagan flipped that upside down. He said it's, and economists use the phrase aggregate demand, which is
Aggregate demand, yeah.
Right, which is econ speak for wages. That's all. And all it means is wages. So, you know, that's what drives an economy. Well, Reagan came along and said, no, that's not what drives an economy. We have a new idea. You know, it was a crazy idea. You know, George Herbert Walker Bush called it voodoo economics.
Yes, he did.
Until he was picked as VP. But, you know, we've got this new idea, and this new idea is that demand doesn't drive an economy, supply drives an economy. And, you know, there are examples where supply actually does stimulate economy. For example, when Steve Jobs invented the iPhone, you know, suddenly people wanted to have one. Or when he invented the Mac, you know, he and Steve Wozniak, oh, yeah, we want to have one. But those are really the exceptions that prove the rule.
But Tom, let me break you right there, because I don't even know if I accept that, right? Because they invented something that was good, and then the demand for that something good came, and then they provided a supply for it.
Exactly. Well, that was my next sentence, was it had workers not had wages that allowed them to buy those products, they would have just faded away into oblivion. So, but Reagan said, we're not going to pay attention to wages anymore. That's irrelevant. We are simply going to pay attention to producers, to the manufacturers, to the makers, not the takers, to use the libertarian language.
You had to bring that one in.
Sorry. Ayn Rand. And it's been a disaster. I mean, you know, it's just been an absolute disaster. From the 1800s, from the mid 1800s until 1980, you know, they were keeping track of productivity and wages, and productivity and wages always tracked each other, because factories wanted, as employees became more productive, largely as a result of automation and the Industrial Revolution, but as employees became more productive, they actually wanted those employees to have more of the fruit of that productivity, because those employees would be customers. You know, Henry Ford rationalized, you know, more than doubling his wages, you know, in one day, because he wanted his employees to be able to buy his cars, or at least he said so. I realize there's more to the story than that, but there's truth to the myth.
Yes.
And Reagan said that's irrelevant. That doesn't matter. And so what happened was, in 1980, that rise of wages came to a screeching halt and has not increased in 40 years since then. But productivity continued to increase, which produced a spread.
A delta, yeah.
Which was, a delta, which was profit. And all that profit that used to go to wages and used to drive and build the middle class instead went to the owner class, the stockholders and the CEOs and the people who owned the corporations. And that's why you've got 12 people worth $1 trillion, 12 Americans worth $1 trillion now. You've got 3 Americans who own more wealth than the bottom half of Americans. It's all the result of Reaganomics and the structural changes, the elimination of enforcement of anti-monopoly laws, a big piece of it, dropping the top corporate and individual tax rate. The individual tax rate was 74%, dropping it down to 28% and keeping it low. These are the things that have destroyed the middle class. And we're still, and people think, oh, Reagan, that was 40 years ago. We are still operating in a Reaganomics environment. Obama never reversed this and Clinton never reversed this. Frankly, I don't think either of them had the political power to do so. But I think now Americans are realizing that Reaganomics was a lie and a scam, and it has devastated the American worker and the American middle class and working class.
I have a question for you.
And locked out small businesses.
I have a question for you because, Clinton didn't have the power to do it. Let me ask you this, what you think about Obama here. Do you remember Obama for America? Do you remember how powerful and sort of within every sphere that organization was? I don't know if you were.
No, I know it was all over the place, but
right.
The fact of the matter is that Obama only had a veto proof for a
few months.
Senate for 74 business days. That was it in his entire 8 years.
And I don't think the Democrats that he had would have gone with him. But
he had people like Joe Lieberman,
right,
who killed the public option.
My big concern, however, was why not mobilize those people to force those people's hands? But I could be wrong there.
I think that's going to happen. I really do. It's Bernie Sanders the other day said, if Joe Biden becomes president, he'll be the most progressive president since Franklin Roosevelt.
Yeah, he said that yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was immediately thinking, what about LBJ, who gave us Medicare and Medicaid and the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act and right. Dozens of different welfare programs and Title IX and Section 8 and all this stuff. And then I thought, he might. If he gets a Franklin Roosevelt style, or frankly an LBJ style, LBJ had more than 2/3 of the House and Senate, both. If he gets that kind of an overwhelming mandate legislatively, he may well do it.
So are you thinking like me that this may actually be a landslide in November?
Yeah, I barring massive election fraud or World War III that would, bring everything to its knees. And I know that Donald Trump is working on both those things as well.
Yeah, I got my clock clean from some of my viewers today when I said it was going to be a landslide. So that's a feeling that I have.
A lot of us are spooked about jinxing things.
Yeah,
4 years ago.
I don't believe in the jinx. I don't. In fact, 4 years ago, what wasn't a surprise at Daily Kos, I wrote that was a likelihood, and because as it turned out, we were looking at Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania for quite a long time, and quite a few people were talking to her people in Brooklyn. Hey, you got to go into Detroit, you got to go into Pittsburgh, you got to go into Milwaukee.
This is where you call for bringing back the capital punishment for Robbie Mook or something like that. I shouldn't even say stuff like that. Political capital punishment.
I know what Tom, trust me, everybody knows what you mean. But let me ask you this, guys. We're coming close to time, and you came up with some. First of all, folks, you've got to get this book. Tom is not going to tell you everything in this book because you got to go buy it. But here's the thing, Tom. What's that?
Okay, I'll tell you everything.
No, don't tell me everything. It's not a good. But here's the deal. You talk about solutions, and one of the things that we don't get in solutions, a lot of these books come out and they tell you stories, right? And what I like about your books is you come out and say, hey, we can do these 5 things or these 6 things. Kind of enumerate those things for me if you don't mind.
Geez, it's been a while since I read my own book.
Okay, well, no, you don't have to get your book. You don't have to get the book, because I tell you what, I have it right here, and then you can tell me exactly what you mean.
Okay.
Democracy immune system, and you described that earlier on.
Right, that's the antitrust laws.
That's the antitrust laws. Then we have the replace a consumer welfare framework.
Now Robert Bork is the guy. He was the intellectual giant, as it were. He certainly thought he was a giant. His book is filled with him praising himself and talking about how wonderful and smart he is. Seriously, honest to God, it's embarrassing to read. But Robert Bork came up with this idea in the late 60s, early 70s, after he was a student of Milton Friedman's at the Chicago School of Economics. that historically we measured, we decided that corporations had multiple constituencies. They had the constituency of their employees, to whom they were responsible, of their community to which they were responsible, of their customers to whom they were responsible, the institution of the corporation itself, to which they were responsible, and the environment and things like that. I mean, there were multiple shareholders essentially, and Robert and our corporate laws all reflected that. Robert Bork came along and said, that's all nonsense. Throw all that stuff out, even though it's been around for hundreds of years. Throw it out. It's BS. The only metric that we should measure a corporation by, in terms of whether it is a monopoly or not, or a destructive monopoly or not. He was not opposed to monopoly. He was opposed to destructive monopolies. Is if they have caused consumer prices to increase. If they cause consumer prices to increase, break them up. If they don't. And thus we got Walmart and we got the airlines and we got everything else. And in fact, actually, they are raising prices. I opened the book with the story that the average American middle-class family is paying
internet, $90.
$5,000 a year as a monopoly tax.
Yeah.
$90 for internet when it's $25, $30 in most of Europe.
Yeah. It's crazy.
And it's faster and better.
I'm from Central America, Panama. And when I went home, I was shocked that my internet in Panama City was faster than my internet in Kingwood, Texas.
Yep.
Amazing.
Probably cheaper.
Much cheaper. They can't afford anything expensive over there.
Yeah.
Okay, now so you talk about breaking up the internet giants. That's self-explicative. Bring back the corporate death penalty. A lot of people don't know what that really means.
Well, we talked about this earlier. It's where a corporation is determined to be acting in something other than the public interest. And so the Secretary of State in the state in which they're incorporated dissolves the corporation. It's a forced bankruptcy, essentially. And people go, oh my God, if you did that to United Airlines. So this is why I don't think we should have bailed out any corporation that's worth more than $1 billion. We shouldn't have given them a penny. And people were like, what? United will go out of business and 20,000 flight attendants will be out of job and 5,000 pilots. And I'm like, yeah, of course. And the next day, 5 new airlines will start, right?
Exactly.
It will open up all these niches in the airline ecosystem. And that's not just true of the airlines. I mean, pick your industry, hotels, restaurants, whatever it may be. Yes, let them fail. And let small businesses come in behind and reinvigorate the American.
What is a guy like the left, like you, really believing in true competition, which is the other one? You're not supposed to believe in competition, sir.
Well, I believe in fair competition. I don't believe in unfair competition.
I know. I'm just kidding here. I know that. And then solution is competition, which is what you just said.
Right, and competition is what should drive businesses. And at its heart, if you wanted a single sentence definition of monopoly, a monopoly exists when a corporation or group of corporations have seized such control of an individual market, niche, or sector that they no longer need to compete with each other, that instead they collaborate with each other. If Delta raises their prices $5 within 30 seconds, United has done the same thing. That's not competition.
The Hidden History of Monopolies, How Big Business Destroyed the American Dream by Thom Hartmann. Thom, thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right. As usual, you're not only a studied man, you're entertaining in the way you inform and teach. Thank you so kindly for being here.
Thanks, Egberto. It's always a pleasure to be here with you.
All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed that. We don't have much time, so let me go ahead and call out my beautiful people here that's here in the chat with us. We have Michael Rudnin, welcome, AVQ, welcome, Mike. Let's see who else is here. Brige, MCP, welcome aboard. We also have Jill Rowlands Muffet, welcome aboard, my friend here with with Los Democratas. And we also have Para ver. Marcia Mullins, welcome aboard. He says he will perhaps run for a third and fourth term. Yeah, I checked. That's why I put that out. Play with you guys a bit. Bruce Pollard, how you doing, my brother? Bruce Pollard is in the house as well. Norman Reynolds, how you doing, Norman? Thanks for being here. Welcome aboard. Maywood kind of populates me with good podcasts. Let's see who else we have here. Para ver. All right. If I miss you, just drop me a line so I can call you out. I like to salute everybody. I think I got Maywood just now. I saw some. Oh, Paul Fleming from ATL. Welcome in, Paul. Welcome aboard. Let's see who else is here. I'm scrolling a little slower so that I can get to it. I'll read all these comments later because we kind of went a little bit long, brothers and sisters. Rose William, how you doing, Rose? Welcome aboard. Rose or a great copy editor. Let's see who else is here. And Jacoby G. Jacobo. Welcome aboard, my brothers and my sisters. Love to see you all. Hey, guys, we got to get out of here in a little bit. But I tell you something that just bugged the hell out of me that I just saw come up as I saw this thing, and it goes like this. The S&P 500 has reached a record level, highest level ever. When I talk to you guys about capitalism as we practice it, diametrically opposed to the people, the average American citizen, how can you have all these corporations doing so well? And please do remember this, brothers and sisters. Please do remember this. Please do remember that all this stuff, the five corporation, the 500, S&P 500, it's just 500 companies, right? But we have thousands of companies, tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of companies. The S&P 500 take out the elite. And like I told you guys several times, what's happening in America today is this. All the little guys are failing. All the little people are failing, which means all the big companies are eating up everything that those companies who had to be closed, those companies who had nothing. And when we talk about freezing the economy, remember, we have a government led by Donald Trump who screwed us all by not mitigating the virus, which forced us to close down most corporations, most small companies to mitigate this issue. Instead of putting our economy on ice and saying, let's have a status quo freeze. We supply everybody with just a stay alive amount of money, so that when the economy opens again, we resume where we were before. We don't have all the big companies that were now able to eat us all. Brothers and sisters, this is what the capitalist structure looks like. The reason the markets are going high is because the market is a market of a few, and they're eating everybody else. They're eating all those small companies that are now out of business. Main Street America is suffering. A lot of people are in food lines. How the hell your economic system is then the market, the driving force supposedly of your system, doing fine? Can that be anything else than evil? Please also, folks, get my book. It's worth it. How to talk to your right-wing relatives, friends, and neighbors. And the reason I'm saying that, I don't only talk about that in the book, right? I talk about something else that I'm talking about here as well. In that book, I also cover all these discussions because you have to be aware. You have to be aware of some of the stuff you just heard Thom and I talk about, but you have to be aware of economic systems and how they work. You have to be understand how different employees are paid, how different jobs work. When you know that, when you start to promote the policies that we say we need to these people, you need to have the answers, right? And I have that in the book as well. I'm putting the link in the book as well. Why am I telling you this? As you see the stock market go up, Donald Trump is going to start saying, you see, I'm a great president. The stock market is at its high. Understand why. It's at its high because it is eating you. Understand that it has eaten all the businesses of your friends, your families, and others. Please, people, understand this and preach this and tell people about this and share this program. Because, man, we are about to lose it all. Thank you so kindly for having been here with us. Thank you for being a part of the Politics Done Right family. Let's stay together. Let's make sure other folks hear this stuff. My name is Egberto Willis. This is Politics Done Right. And you know how I end this, baby. I am what? Out. I'm Egberto Willis, host of Politics Done Right, an independent news program. I post several news videos of interest every day. I ask you so kindly to subscribe to my channel. And please leave me some comments. Thank you very much.